I was caught out by a bit of a con. I went up to the counter and asked the guy there if there were any messages for me. He checked the drawer for number 305, pulled out a piece of paper and held it out to me. As I read it, the two guys who'd been sitting in the lobby when I walked in got up and headed towards me. I read the note, which asked me to call Detective Howard Miller and gave me a phone number. Two men approached me from either side. The one on the right asked if I was Frank Thomas. I said yes, I'm Detective Eisen, and the man on my left is Detective Phillips. He said, "What can I do for you?" I showed him the note in my hand. It was from Detective Miller of the Branson Police Department. He said he had no idea who Miller was. Apparently, he called and left this message at 10. "We called you at 0 this morning, but you never called us back. So, we called you to ask if we could find you. We also wanted to ask you where you've been all day. Could you just answer the question from 8 to 9? I had breakfast here in the hotel restaurant with a couple of acquaintances from 9 on. I attended a seminar here in one of the hotel conference rooms from noon to 1. I had lunch with some people I met during the seminar, and from 1 to half 5 I attended the afternoon session. I was at the hotel from 4:30 to 6:00 was the post-seminar cocktail hour, from 6 to 7:15 or so. It was dinner at the hotel restaurant, and from 7, I was in the boom boom room for drinks until 5 minutes ago. Now it's my turn. What does all this mean? I think it would be best if you talk to Detective Miller about it. One last question. Where were you last night between midnight and 4? I slept in my bed. Can anyone confirm that? Why? Do I need someone to confirm that I was asleep again? You need to get that from Detective Miller. I looked from Elson to Phillips, then walked over to the phone. I asked the operator to charge the call to my room, and then called the number on the note to Detective Miller. It was a cell phone because the third call was answered, even though it was late. "Hello, Detective Miller. Yes, my name is Frank Thomas. You asked to be reached." "Yes, Mr. Thomas, you're a hard man to reach. I've been in meetings most of the day. I just got your message. I have 2 local police officers with me now, and they are asking me questions, but they won't tell me what's going on. I'm sorry to have to tell you, Mr. Thomas, but your wife has died. She was fine when I spoke to her last night." "What time was that?" "About 6:00. Where did you call her from?" "My hotel room, sometime between midnight and 4:15. I'm really sorry to tell you that your wife was murdered. It looks like someone broke into your house and killed her. Do you have any idea who did it? Was it a botched robbery? Did they steal anything like TVs or furniture? I can't talk about this over the phone. When you get home, we'll discuss the details. I'll try to be on the first flight out first thing. In the morning, could I please speak to the officers?" "Sure, I've put Larson on the phone. I'll be upstairs in my room packing. I need to call the airlines and leave some messages for the seminar people on the way home." I thought about Melissa. We met at a cocktail party, and I fell head over heels in love with her fiery redhead, with a face that... She was a real charmer, with a smile that lit up the room and a body made for sin. There was someone else there, though, and since I wanted to get down to business with quite a few people at the party, I had to keep my cool. I waited until I caught her alone, and after making sure no one was looking, I handed her a piece of paper with my name and phone number on it, and a short message. I left her a message and called her the next day to ask why she thought I'd assume she'd call him. The British military unit has a motto that fits the situation: "He who dares wins." How could I pass up the chance to meet someone so confident? You really shouldn't. She gave me her address and I picked her up at 6. We had dinner at 6 p.m. She was gorgeous, smart, and funny. On our third date, she told me we'd be having dinner at her place and I just needed to bring wine. When we'd finished, the bottle was empty. She took my hand and said, "I hope you're not going to leave early. We need to see if we have a future together." She led me into her bedroom and we had sex. She was incredible, but I must have done everything right because in the morning, after another intense session, she said, "You'll do fine." 9 months later, we got married. I was interrupted by the announcement, "Please put seatbacks and tray tables in the upright position as we prepare to board." I called ahead to let Miller know what flight I would be taking and when it should arrive. He and his partner, Detective Paulson, were waiting for me when I got off the plane. After introductions, he asked me to accompany them to the station. I told him that I would drive my car out of the garage and either follow them or meet them at the police station. He said that they would. I'd really prefer not to go with them. I'm here, my car is here, and there's no point in driving downtown with you and then turning around and coming back here to get my car. So, unless you arrest me, I'll take my car. One might wonder why you're not being very cooperative, Mr. Thomas. No one in my position would be surprised. Let's cut the dance a little short. My wife was murdered, and we both know I'm a suspect, even though I was almost 400 miles away and can prove it. We both know that the officers you spoke to last, I've just been over to the other side to verify everything I told you before. I think we both know that you didn't tell me anything about what happened to my wife when we spoke last night. All you said was that we'd talk about it when I got back here. Now you want me to just walk away and leave my car here. That tells me that you don't think I'm going to need it anymore. It seems like you've pretty much decided that I'm your guy. You expect to see me behind bars for the rest of the day, so my car can just park here. You expect me to cooperate. I'm not going to just hand over everything. On Way Street, he looked at me, then nodded. I think we're starting off on the wrong foot. He looked around and then pointed to one of the many food places scattered throughout the terminal and said, "Hey, let's sit down at a table and have a coffee. I'll bring you up to speed as soon as we sit down for coffee." Miller said yesterday at about 9, it was 10 in the morning when a friend of your wife, Mary Osborne, arrived to pick her up for a she'd arranged a shopping trip, but when she didn't get an answer at the door, she tried it and found it open. She called out for your wife, but there was no answer. She checked and saw that your wife's car was still parked in the garage, so she thought maybe your wife had overslept. She went upstairs and found your wife dead on the bedroom floor. She called, but the coroner said your wife had been dead for at least 4 hours by the time she was discovered. When you told me she was murdered, I thought she'd been shot twice. I don't think you're telling me everything because I'm not there. There's a procedure to be followed in cases like this. There has to be a formal interview at the station, which will be recorded. I've already told you more than I should have. Get your car and meet us at the police station. Should I bring my lawyer with me? That's up to you. You have every right to do so as a police officer. I must admit, though, that I don't want you to exercise that right. Lawyers have a habit of interrupting constantly, which makes the interrogation difficult. The smooth flow of the interrogation itself may tell the investigator something, so I'm going to be questioned. Of course you are. You said so yourself until you're exonerated. You're a person of interest in the investigation into. After your wife's death, I finished my coffee and got on the bus to pick up my car at the police station. I was led into a room where I was joined by Miller and Paulson. They told me the interrogation was being recorded and asked if I wanted a lawyer present. I said no. They asked me where I had been that evening, and I told them the same thing I had told the detectives at the hotel. Then Paulson asked me, I've got a few guns, mostly .22 caliber, but also some .45 and .40 caliber. I might have a couple of 357 Magnums, but I'm not sure. I don't actually own them. They belong to my company, Paladin Security. You own Paladin? I do. He thought for a few seconds, then asked, Do you know Robert Turner? I've never met him, but I know who he is. What do you know about him? I'm not completely up to date on this, but last week he was my wife's current boyfriend. I think it was sometime in early April when she contacted him. You should definitely hire a lawyer, Mr. Thomas. Why? Because you've just admitted that you knew Robert Turner was your wife's boyfriend, and Robert Turner was found dead in the bedroom with your wife. You've just suggested that I, being an abusive husband, killed them both in a... It's ridiculous to suggest that I killed them in a fit of jealousy. If I was going to kill someone in a fit of rage, it would be Ronald Porter. He was the first person she cheated on me with after Porter. There were at least 4 others, and I never touched a hair on their heads. Are you saying that I have private investigator reports on them and you didn't do anything to them? I saw the look on Paulson's face. The sign said, You miserable, what kind of man are you? Miller replied, Have you ever been divorced or know anyone who has? I know a few people who have been through it. How did they come out of it? Not very well, I'm afraid. That was my problem. I did a good job for myself. My house is worth a little over $3 million, and the business I worked hard to build is worth $10 to $12 million. It's a no-fault fortune, so even if I catch Melissa cheating, she'll get half of. If I killed her, I'd have to sell the house and business, give half to Melissa, and then pay court costs and attorney's fees. I'd probably also have to pay child support to the cheating woman for a year. That's a motive, maybe, but it wouldn't make sense for me to kill her and risk going to jail when I'd get rid of her for free in 9 months. She'd go into a trust fund when she turned 30. In 9 months, she'll be 30. That's around $7 million. Then we'd have equal assets. I could divorce the woman and keep everything I own. In fact, killing her now deprives me of an unexpected profit. If she'd waited until her 30 seconds to die, I would have inherited everything after her. Now all that money will go to charities. I should have lived with her. In another 9 months, you never told me how she died. 2 shots to the forehead. Turner got the same thing. 2 bullets to the forehead, double blows to the head. Rings any bells? Should it? Did you check out Turner's wife? She has an airtight alibi. No wonder she'd do it. Did you check her family? Her family. Her father is Vito Genovese, and if half of what you've heard about him is true, he'll have no problem finding someone to help him solve the problem. His favorite daughter, family honor and all that, isn't a double blow to the head. It's a sign of a mob-style hit. Miller and Paulson looked at each other, and I could see the wheels turning. Miller looked at me and asked, "Can you confirm what you're saying? I have the private investigator's reports on her lovers, and I can give you the name. You can also get the trust fund info from her lawyer. The Genoff part is in the private investigator's report on Turner. Did your wife know you were aware of her activities? I don't think so. I acted like an ignorant husband to her. She was great in bed and never turned me down. I wasn't going to go without sex until she was 30. I think we're all set here, but please keep us posted on your whereabouts in case we need to talk to you again." As they lowered Melissa's casket into the pit, I looked around at the gathered Murs and wondered if any of them had any idea what had happened. When I graduated from college in my 22nds, I wasn't ready for it. I was ready to settle down, but I wanted to do something exciting. Take some risks and enjoy life before settling into a 9 to -5 life spent with a June Cleaver-type wife, a house with a board fence and 2 or 3 kids. Clinton was sending troops to Bosnia, and there was bound to be some excitement. So I joined the army. I didn't even go through basic training in the 3rd week of basic training. Some clowns. In my platoon, they decided they needed to teach a college boy some manners and threw me a party. I was in the shower when it happened, with a blanket over me and several guys holding me down. I must have been helpless when they started hitting me with socks filled with bars of soap. I've never practiced martial arts, and I don't even know why I did what I did. It was probably something I saw in a movie, and I subconsciously remembered to swing my foot, not kick, but swing hard from right to left and knock the legs out from under one of the guys. He fell, hit his head on the shower floor, and one of the others said, "Jesus, he's bleeding." One of the guys let go of me to bend over and check the guy on the floor who'd loosened his grip. That loosened my grip too, and I got the other guy, who fell to the floor. I suddenly realized that the guys holding me weren't enough, so I moved away from them and crawled out from under the blanket. 2 of the men were on the floor, and a 3rd was bent over them, while the 2 who were standing were looking at me with looks that said, "Oh, that's not the way it was supposed to happen." I grabbed one of them by the arm and threw him face first into the shower wall, and he fell. The other guy started to stagger back while the guy on his knees started to get up. I decided I'd rather he fell than get up, so I hit him in the face with my knee and saw blood rush from his broken nose. As he started to fall, I kicked him hard in the ribs with the heel of my foot. I headed for the guy who was still standing, but he turned and ran. The first guy I pulled out of the way wasn't moving. The second guy was a different story. I fell on his back, grabbed his head, and smashed it to the floor. The platoon sergeants were already there. Sergeant Marks saw the blanket and socks filled with soap and immediately realized what was going on. I tried to walk past him, but he asked me where I was going. "There's another one," I said, "and I'm going to get him." "Not now," he said. I tried to walk past him, but he said, "Stop it. Thomas, I don't know how you did it, but it's not going to be that easy with me now. Just stand there while I sort things out." Everything was sorted out, and I found myself in custody on my 2nd day there. I was summoned to the room where the captain was sitting at the desk. On the way from my cell to the room, the policeman accompanying me told me that I was to go and stow 6 feet in front of the desk. I saluted and said, "Private Thomas reports as ordered, sir." I held the salute until it was returned. I stopped in front of the table and said, "I'm Private Thomas. You didn't forget anything, did you? I think you forgot the salute." "I haven't forgotten the salute, sir. I also haven't forgotten that both are a sign of respect. I have no respect for people who treat me the way I was treated just because I was defending myself. You put 4 people in the infirmary, which doesn't bother you at all. The only thing that bothers me is that Sergeant Marr wouldn't let me catch up with the 5th. What's it going to take for you to start saying, 'Sir, you have to earn my respect'? That's where my long association with Lieutenant, Captain, Major Colonel Jones Smith, or whatever his real name and rank is, apparently comes in. Some people in the U.S. Army have a no-prisoners attitude. I was taken out of basic training and sent to an undisclosed location where I went through training that very few other recruits went through. I learned how to use guns, knives, sticks, and rocks. I also learned how to pick locks in cars, create false identities, fly small airplanes, pilot small boats, and more. Then I was released. The oath I took when I enlisted was to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. However, the foreign part was never included. You'd be surprised to know how many internal enemies America had, and our way of defending against them was to eliminate them in various ways, including accidental drowning, falling downstairs and breaking necks, and automobile accidents. These are just a few examples of how these problems were dealt with. It makes you paranoid. You start wondering what will happen if the operation goes wrong. What if they need someone to blame? What if something happened, and the best solution would be for you to disappear or for your body to be found with compromising documents? Given what they made you do, you just knew that if your elimination was required, they wouldn't even think twice. I've been in this situation for 6 years. When I got laid off, I went into the security business. Long story short, my company provides security specialists who are bodyguards and armed guards for various companies. I had been away for a year when I met Melissa at a cocktail party. I dated her and then asked her to marry me. We had what I thought was a good marriage. We had been married for a little while. It was over a year later when I woke up one morning and saw Melissa sleeping next to me. I suddenly realized that she was cheating on me. I'd never seen or heard anything that made me think that. Of course, I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I hired a private investigator. Within a week, I had the goods on Melissa and one Ronald Porter. I had to decide what to do next. I knew what I had to do, but I also knew it would be tough. Melissa was loving and affectionate, and she never turned me down in the bedroom. In fact, at least half the time, Melissa was the instigator. I had no idea why she cheated, but I didn't even want to know. All I knew was that the marriage would last as long as I made plans. I checked on Melissa periodically. Over the next few weeks, she had at least 4 more lovers. I'm sure there were more, but I didn't find out about them all. I didn't check on her every day, so some of them happened when I wasn't around. I was in the military at the time, and I learned to fly because it was part of my job. I never liked it, though. It was just something I had to do occasionally as part of an operation. Once I left the service, I never expected to fly again. I never thought I'd get to fly again, except as a passenger on a commercial airline, using one of the fake IDs I had stashed away when I was in the Army, and some of the money I had stashed. I bought a Cessna 172, a Honda Accord, and a Harley from one of my weapon stash. I selected a .22 caliber pistol with a silencer and waited for the right opportunity. It was when I got the detective's report on Robert Turner and who his father was. I'm not sure. I was always invited to seminars and trade shows, and when I was invited to a seminar on industrial safety, I accepted. At the end of the program on Monday, I stayed late for a drink and then went back to my room. I called Melissa and let her know where I was staying, told her I loved her and missed her, and she told me the same thing. I chose my hotel because it was one of the few in the area that didn't have security cameras covered the hallways and stairwells. Once in my room, I changed into jeans, tennis shoes, a sweatshirt, and a windbreaker. I put on a baseball cap, a false mustache, and glasses with clear lenses. I walked down the stairs and out the side door, then walked 6 blocks and stopped a cab. It took me across town to a lonely bar. As soon as the cab was out of sight, I walked 2 blocks to a motel where I parked the Honda Accord, drove to the airfield where I had a Cessna parked, filed a flight plan, and then took off. Once in the air, I closed my flight plan and headed home. The flight lasted just over 3 hours, and after I landed and shut down the Cessna, I got my Harley ready and headed for my house. I parked 2 blocks away, walked home, and quietly entered the house. I walked over to my home office, grabbed a bag that was in the closet, and opened it. I pulled out a pair of latex gloves and a pair of boots and put them on. I took the stun gun out of the bag and double-checked that it was fully charged. Everything was ready, so I quietly walked up the stairs to the bedroom. And I found that I had gotten a bonus. I expected only Melissa to be there, but I could tell from the sounds coming from the room that she wasn't alone. As I walked down the hallway, I heard my wife asking her partner to make love to her. I walked into the bedroom and immediately recognized the man as her last lover, which was the icing on the cake for me. Melissa saw me, her face went pale, and she screamed. Turner turned around. I turned around and saw him, and just at that moment I shot him with the stun gun. He fell to the floor and flopped around, and I quickly walked over to the bed, grabbed Melissa and put a gag in her mouth. I handcuffed her to the bed, and then, with the handle of my gun, I hit Turner in the head and knocked him out. I went downstairs, got a sharp knife from the knife block on the kitchen table, and went back upstairs. I smiled. I told Melissa it was very nice of her to invite her sex buddy over. I thought I'd find her here alone, but I was wrong. I rolled Turner over onto his back and waited for him to come to his senses. While I waited, I talked to Melissa. Did you have a good time? Wife is better than Porter. Why did you dump Porter? Was it because Hathaway was better? But then if it was always because you were looking for better I guess Prince was better than Hathaway. And Davidson was better than Porter. That kind of humbles me a little, doesn't it? Melissa was crying and trying to free herself from the bed as I spoke. Turner finally started to move. I looked at Melissa and said, "If Turner is so much better than the others, it must be because you really like him. Who am I to deprive you of what you want?" I leaned over and I picked Turner up and looked him straight in the eyes. I told him it wasn't nice to have sex with another man's wife, especially in his house and on his bed. Then I took away his dignity and held it in front of Melissa's face, while Turner screamed and kicked and thrashed around on the bedroom floor. "Here he is, Melissa. He's all yours to have and keep forever." I pulled the gag out of her mouth, and before she could close it, I shoved. I shoved Turner's dignity as deep into her mouth as I could and then put the gag back in place so she couldn't spit it out. I picked up the silenced pistol, put it to Turner's forehead and said, "I hope she was worth it." I put 2 bullets in him. I turned to Melissa and asked, "I guess I'll never know why you stabbed me in the back with all those PE moodles. I'm not going to take out what's in your mouth. I just hope all the good times you had were worth the price you have to pay. It's a real shame, Melissa. I really did love you." I pointed the gun at her forehead and her eyes got really big before I pulled the trigger and closed them for good. I pulled out the gag and uncuffed her. I put everything in my bag and left the house. 4 hours later, I was back in my hotel room, and the clock on the bedside table showed 5. I slept for 2 hours, then got up, ate breakfast, and went to the seminar. I watched the coffin being lowered into the ground and went over everything in my head. I was pretty sure I had everything under control. A check of my Army record would show that I had spent all my time in the intendant office working in supply depots. There was nothing there that could have generated any interest. My lack of an alibi should serve as an alibi of sorts, since if I did this dirty deed, I'll wait a couple of weeks and then I'll make a business trip. I'll use my fake ID to sell the Cessna and the Accord. I left the Harley, where it had a very good chance of being stolen. In any case, it couldn't be traced back to me. I stepped forward and dropped the single red rose on Melissa's casket. I figured all I had to do now is act normal and wait and see what happens. Subscribe to my channel. Thanks.